really feel like work.
Right. Exactly, right.
Yeah.
Uh, right, thank you. So it is 1:18, I
Yep.
believe. Should we start? Should you start or I start
I'll
or?
do the welcome. Thanks, Kai. So we've got looks like 7 participants. Some others may be joining us. I have started the recording. Welcome to our second block this afternoon. Second block of concurrent sessions and the final block within the Creativity Expert Exchange. I am Gerard Puccio, chair of the Center for Applied Imagination. I have the great delight to be the moderator for the session and to introduce to you our speaker, Dr. Kai Wang. Kai, many years ago, we were just recounting, but not getting into the specific numbers, was a distance student in our graduate program. Great example of someone who already had a terminal degree who came through our graduate program to add on to his experience specifically in the field of creativity. And Kai has been a longtime participant and contributor to the Creativity Expert Exchange. So this continues the dialogue around artificial intelligence. We are recording this session. If you prefer not to be captured in that video, you can have your camera off. But again, Kai probably has the same perspective as I do. It's nice to see faces and nonverbal reactions. So we do encourage you to keep your camera on. Kai did indicate that he's open to interaction throughout rather than saving the questions for the end of the presentation. So he did indicate he is open for more of an interactive session. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Wang before I turn the microphone over to him. He is the founder of AI Ager, a training and consulting firm focused on innovation and artificial intelligence adoption. He works with organizations to leverage AI to boost productivity, enhance the quality and consistency of outputs, and support complex decision making, including business proposal development and product strategy. He also teaches courses on AI and innovation at the Stevens Institute of Technology, where he earned his PhD in technology management. And yes, he is a proud alumnus of Buffalo State University. So, Dr. Wang, I turn the microphone over to you. The session runs until 2 o'clock ish local time, at which point, somewhere thereabouts, we will do a formal close to the conference. So with that time frame in mind, Dr. Wang, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Puccio. So it's really a great honor to be here, and also thank you, the audience, for choosing this session. Obviously, you have other choices as well. All right, so thank you all, and let's just jump right into that. And so the topic today is about how generative AI enhances or hinders our creativity. And as mentioned by Dr. Puccio, I happen to have some background in both creativity studies, obviously from Buffalo State, as well as some serious study in the world of business school. So I hope that the different expertise areas that I'm bringing here can be useful for our audience. So I'll skip the detail. If you're interested, we can, I'll leave my email later. So specifically today, I'd like to talk about essentially four questions. And some of the questions kind of what was already addressed by earlier sessions. So I might change the, let's say, weight a little bit and maybe cover little bit more about the things may not have been addressed a lot versus those that are already mentioned much in earlier sessions. Essentially, the questions are, okay, first of all, what is large language model? How creative it really is? And second, what are the benefits of using it, right? And third is, are there conditions for large language models to benefit us? And could it harm our creativity? And at the end, accordingly, what do we do, right? So essentially, that's what we want to cover. And please do allow me introduce a bit more about AI because I happen to teach in the business school about it, so perhaps I can talk a little bit more about it. But the one confession I have to make is that this session is not just is not about all generative AI, right? Generative AI can actually be many different things. It could be, for example, visual. It can create images, it can create videos, can create music. Unfortunately, well, at least I don't study those things. I don't study audio, video, image, and so on. I'm more familiar with the literature on the language aspect, which happens to be more related to idea generation. That's where I'm most familiar with, and that's what I chose to focus on. So again, this is only about language model. It's not about any other modality such as music, video, image at all. So first question, again, what is large language model and how creative it really is? So today, let me take the perspective of the a bit of overall introduction of this concept. And later, when I talk about how large language model can be useful or can be harmful, in that aspect, I'm going to focus more on the empirical studies. So I will skip theoretical ones. I will skip anecdotal evidence, which I'm sure you all have already. So first of all, I guess at this point, most of us already know that large language model is one type of AI, and more specifically is artificial neural network. It is trained on basically a huge chunk or huge proportion on the internet, almost uh, read all the internet. And as a consequence, the large language model is able to essentially take an input and predict what the next word is. Strictly speaking, it's next token, but the difference is minor. So we can think of a large language model being a artificial neural network that has read almost the entire internet, such that it is able to take an input and predict what the next word is going to be. And the picture here can show that it's actually giving us a probability distribution. In other words, it's not going to give us exactly one word, and instead it's uh, behind the scene, right under the hood, what it really generates is a probability distribution. So for example, the cat eats, and it's going to give us a distribution such that food is 95% chance, right? There's 4% chance that the next word is meal, and well, there's next to zero probability of the cat eats car, right? So that is the essence of what the language model is really doing behind the scene, which is very different from our impression of what it can do, right? What it can do seems to be so powerful, so versatile, it can do almost all the things that humans do with language. But again, behind the scene is rather basic. It's generating a probability distribution of the next word. Some best large language model so far is here, but obviously it's changing, so we don't have to get into that. So please do allow me to talk slightly more about, again, AI in the sense that hopefully it will give us more background and hopefully that will inform our understanding of AI and creativity in a more grounded way. As an example, the way that it works is an AI, or more specifically, large language model, take an input and iteratively predict the next word, right? So, for example, if we feed AI a word binge, uh, starting with binge, it may give us a list of possible next word. It could be binge on, binge end, binge off. But then you show the next actual word of an internet document, right? It's binge drinking. And then again, that the combination of the input binge and the actual word drinking is going to be feedback to AI for it to predict the next word. So again, when in a training, it is iteratively predicting next word. And what is the color coding here? The color coding shows whether the actual next word is surprising to AI or not. So, for example, the red word kill here is very surprising to AI because it did not predict that the next word was going to be kill. So that's just an example of the fact that how AI is trained. It is essentially take almost the entire internet and word by word feed to the AI, the artificial neural network, for it to predict the next word and show that word one by one so that it is continuously tuned to be able to achieve better accuracy in predicting the next word. So that is essentially how the first step of training large language model is. So please do allow me just to talk about it a little bit. So that is the first step, which is taking the whole internet and make the AI a word prediction machine. And then you have additional steps to make it, train it to be a conversational assistant that is desirable. Okay, that's essentially how large language model is made. So there are a couple of things that I do want to emphasize here. So for one, because large language model is trained on almost the entire internet, it covers pretty much all the knowledge domains, right? So in other words, you can ask obviously all kinds of questions across all kinds of disciplines, which is pretty remarkable. But there are additional things that I think we should emphasize. For one, a large language model doesn't really know facts as we do. What it really does, again, is to predict the next likely word, right? So whether it predicts it right or not, it's not, trying to capture the facts in our human sense, right? So if we want facts, we may look up something in a library, we may, look up something from a credible source. But large language model doesn't really do that. It does not really go back to a book and flip through that. What it really does is just based on its model, it's going to predict the next word. So it is not really based on facts in the human sense. And I think that's one part that many people don't recognize. But there's a misconception on the other hand, which is some people may think that the large language model is only predicting the next word. And some people think that it's just a statistical machine. But it turns out it's more than just statistical prediction. It has new capabilities that are not specifically programmed. So for example, in the training of language model, it's not trained to solve multi-step math problems. However, when the language model becomes so big in terms of its number of parameters and in terms of how much data it sort of process, it somehow just get these new capabilities that are not specifically designed. So in other words, it is more than just a statistical prediction. It does have capabilities that are not very explicitly designed. I do want to spend maybe 1 minute to address some common myths, and I think it's not necessarily well known. So number one is that some people think AI is human-like, and that is actually not true at all. AI is not really like humans because for AI to be able to perform, it reads almost the whole internet, and we humans definitely do not need to read the whole internet to be able to, reason, right? And it looks like AI does. So if you open the hood, right, if you wonder what's really going on behind the scene, it's all just linear algebra, matrix calculations, which is unlikely how we humans work. So AI is really not human-like. AI is more like an alien. The second thing, common myth that people thought is that AI models are learning from us. Actually, no, AI model does not learn from us. Uh, the only reason why AI models are improving is because those AI companies are training it. AI models are not learning from our conversations. So I think that's the part where most people misunderstood. So Just like when we drive a car, the AI model, the engine of the car doesn't learn from us. The engine of the car stays the same regardless of how we drive it. And an AI model does not learn from our conversations. It does not learn at all. The only way for it to learn is for the AI company to actively train it, which is totally different from our regular conversations. So in that sense, we cannot really train AI models. The only one who can train AI models are those AI companies, such as OpenAI. And feel free to jump in if you disagree or if you have some comment. So number three, AI. Some people think that AI sometimes hallucinates, and actually that's wrong. AI does not sometimes hallucinate. AI hallucinates all the time. AI hallucinates all the time. It's not hallucinating when it's wrong. It is hallucinating every single second. Can we see this example here on the slide?
Yes.
So it is someone asked AI, I want to wash my car. The car wash is 50 meters away. Should I walk or should I drive? Okay, that's the answer that AI gives that is totally nonsense because obviously we know, we as humans, we know that if you want to wash your car, you pretty much have to drive your car there. However, AI doesn't know because AI doesn't live in the physical reality, right? And why is it a big deal? It's just saying that it's essentially it's a prediction machine. It's predicting what the next word should be. So if it doesn't really know what car wash works in the physical world, then it's just not going to give you the right answer. So AI is not hallucinating sometimes, it's hallucinating all the time. Even if it is correct, even when it is correct, it is still hallucinating. It's just hallucinating in the correct way. So the other way to say that is there's no inherent difference between a correct answer and a wrong answer. The correct answer and the wrong answer are generated by exactly the same mechanism. There's no separate mechanism to generate wrong answer. So I think that is something that many people may not realize. So hallucination is basically what AI does all the time. Just like it doesn't really know what a car wash is, it's just spitting out words. All right. So the next question is how creative it really is. So like I said, I'm going to focus on empirical studies instead of either pure theories, which there are theories out there about how creative AI can be. And there are also anecdotal evidence all around. But here, I think it may be useful to choose very specifically empirical studies that are peer-reviewed, right? So uh, I guess we don't have to get into every single detail, but long story short, across many different kinds of divergent thinking tasks, such as alternative use, right? What are all the uses of, a book, a brick? Consequence tasks, such as if there's some strange thing happen, what are the consequences? Divergent association task, which is about generating 10 nouns, 10 concepts that are as far from each other as possible. So long story short, across many different tasks, across multiple studies, it is pretty solid. Again, this is peer-reviewed studies that GPT-4, as an example, already surpasses average human performance in these divergent thinking tasks. So I think with so many different studies, I think it's relatively set in the stone. So that is where we are. And by the way, GPT-4, of course, is not even the best model, right? It's just it was the best like a couple of years ago.
So Kai, just going back to that slide, the focus here in these three examples is on divergent thinking. Yeah.
Right.
And probably more specifically divergent thinking around ideation. So like alternative uses, you're playing with divergent thinking, not in terms of how a problem might be framed, but more coming up with alternative ideas for something. So it's interesting to me, and I don't know, based on what you reviewed in the literature, do you find that most people who are testing AI and determining whether it's as creative as humans, if there's a trend to be looking almost exclusively at or predominantly at divergent thinking? Is this a sampling of what is generally done, or do we find other approaches? Because we all know creativity is bigger than
Right,
divergent thinking and bigger than ideation.
right.
Uh, I'm just curious if there's sort of a, a leaning towards what might be, you were talking about myths of AI. I'm not saying divergent thinking is a myth of creativity. It's just a particular aspect of creativity. So you know
Right.
where I'm going with this question.
Right.
What's the research? Is it biased towards ideation?
Right. So there seems to be a bias in divert to well, I guess one of the reasons at least is divergent thinking tasks are so well studied, it's
Yeah.
so well documented across all kinds of even different uh, decades or different d domains. So divergent thinking is pretty popular, and that's where people spend a lot of time on.
Hmm.
There are some other tasks tested, which I can bring up later. So, for example, in the very first task, in the very first study, they did also test social problem solving, scientific problem solving. Uh,
Okay.
they don't, exclusively study divergent thinking. And by the way, to get into the nuance, actually, the large language models such as GPT-4, they are really good with divergent thinking and maybe problem solving, but it seems to be consistent that the language models seem to be a little behind in creative writing. So the same thing shows up in the third study where they tested out creative writing,
Hmm.
poems, stories, small fictions. So it seems that creative writing may be a bit, humans still has some advantage, at least according to the study. And divergent thinking seems to be more or less, that seems to be more set in the stone that
That yeah. Do you have an opinion as to why that might be? Why AI platforms are slightly behind when it comes to creative writing compared to humans? Is it more
uh,
complex thinking?
yes, I only have a hunch, right? So I don't
Yeah.
know. So creative writing, it's more than just one idea or fluency or just coming up with ideas that are not obvious. Creative writing also needs a lot of coherence, right? So we need to make sure that story, the first sentence, the last sentence, they're all coherent.
Mhm.
And there are plots and people's characters and there's just more nuance to it than coming up with 20 different ways of using a brick. So
That Yeah, that's my sense as well, and I'm really glad. Thank you for answering the question, and that maybe is my confirmation bias is creative writing entails more of the creative process than a strict divergent thinking task with alternative uses, for example, where creative writing is blending, clarifying, and developing, and then finally, fashioning something that is brought to fruition. So that's interesting. I'm glad you touched on that.
sure, thank you. So yes, creative writing has more to it than again coming up with 20 different uses of an object. So
Yeah.
it seems to be more or less consistent, at least I should say consistent across multiple studies. That seems to be the case.
Hmm.
A related question is, does AI fixate like humans, right? So we humans tend to fixate. As an example, in a separate study where researchers tried a egg drop task, which is coming up with solutions to make sure that when a chicken egg drops from 10 meters or 30 feet, um, and does not break. And they have human participants coming up with ideas and ChatGPT-4 coming up with ideas. So what they found out is both humans and AI have a little bit of fixation in this, have have comparable degree of fixation in the sense that the proportion of ideas in common categories, such as cushion the fall, protecting the egg, versus uncommon idea categories, that composition or that proportion breakdown seem to be comparable between AI and humans. In other words, uh, both AI and us tend to favor the common ideas and to a similar degree. So it looks like AI might have some similar tendency in terms of fixating on common categories of ideas. However, humans do have a advantage in the sense that we are better able to evaluate whether the ideas are original or not. And AI seems to be less able to distinguish between the ideas that are actually original versus conventional. So according to that study, which is from Frontiers in Psychology, that is their conclusion. So to summarize a little, I think in general there are multiple peer-reviewed studies published in credible journals that GPT-4 is seem to be passing the average human performance in divergent thinking tasks. And however, humans still seem to have an edge in creative writing, which again is it's not one study, it's multiple studies. And again, the last study seemed to suggest that even though AI is able to create more ideas, the actual breakdown of ideas in common categories versus uncommon categories seems to be about the same as humans. And AI may not be particularly good at differentiate the original ideas from others. So that's just some studies that I chose seems to be published in better journals and strictly empirical. And again, I skipped some theoretical ones, which does not have data behind it. So that's just a quick snapshot of roughly how creative AI already is. And then the next question is what are the benefits? So again, I focus on the empirical study, which I'm sure we have a lot of anecdotal evidence, but in general, the benefits are straightforward in different kind of tasks, in product improvement tasks, using AI versus not using AI, there is a difference. So different kind of tasks, it can be product improvement, it can be choosing a creative gift for teenagers, making a toy, repurposing some items. So it is more or less consistent that using AI is helping people to get to ideas or solutions that are typically more original or more creative. There is a slight difference in the second study where the human crowd, which is human crowd is not student, it's not college student in a lab. A human crowd is making an announcement, and anyone has an internet connection can volunteer to provide solutions. That is the slight difference there. The human crowd seems to have ideas that are more novel, versus human AI collaboration seems to get to solutions that are more uh, of superior quality or financial values. So that's a little exception, but typically there are multiple studies suggesting that using AI is improving. And that is also consistent with a literature review saying specifically that AI improves the speed and improves average creativity of ideas when humans are working with it. Uh, Now, an important question is, does AI improve the top ideas, right? Meaning, if you have 200 ideas, what about the one on the top? Are they better when you use AI? The evidence so far is conflicting, so I don't think we have a verdict on that. Uh, the other thing that seems to be interesting is that in an empirical study, they found out that ChatGPT 3.5, which is a little old, they are good at generating incremental ideas, but not so much radical ideas. So they have human raters to evaluate the ideas, and those ideas generated with the help of ChatGPT seems to be incremental, even though the quality may be good. They're more on the incremental side and less likely to be radical, which is not exactly surprising because AI is trained on, a huge amount of human content and making the prediction based on that. So it is not inherently designed to come up with something radical, right? So it may, but at least radical ideas are not the initial design of what AI does. So the question three is, what are some conditions for the benefits, and can there be harm from the large language model? I think for this, um, some of this is already covered in earlier talks, but specifically in terms of empirical evidence, there are some suggesting that there are some studies suggesting multiple factors where the different conditions or contexts influence the benefits of AI. So in one study, so people have the choice of, no, people are putting in different conditions. They can ask one questions with AI, they can ask nine questions with AI, or they can ask five questions, right? It turns out that moderate levels of human AI collaboration lead to better creative performance. So in other words, asking four questions or having five, having around five questions or five exchanges seem to lead to better creative performance than asking too little or asking too many. So that's one empirical study. There are some, there's another study showing that um, timing also matters. Timing meaning, do we use AI from the beginning or do we use AI after we think for ourselves first? And not surprisingly, using AI from the very beginning actually reduced the number of original ideas. And people in general, when they use AI from the very beginning, they tend to fixate on AI's ideas and explore less than otherwise. So the timing, meaning when do we use AI? Do we use it at the beginning or do we use it after our independent ideation? That seem to make a difference. So that is the aspect of AI use, which I believe was mentioned in previous talk as well. But here is the actual empirical evidence showing that it is documented as a uh, kind of effect. All right, so there are some mathematical modeling which suggests that if we take AI's output without really independently checking it or improving it, it may not be good for the long run, the performance, in the sense that if we can have AI's output free at will on demand, then people tend to just use that without thinking through it, and that can actually stifle innovation. But that is more of a mathematical modeling, so that is not particularly empirical study. However, I think it's in this category of AI use influencing the result. So that study basically suggests that we should not use AI to just give us a final output. We should have humans have our initial output first before asking AI, which is aligned with the empirical study of the timing of AI use. Okay, so that's the use. How do we use it? And some other conditions, including person. And for time's sake, I won't get into all the detail, but essentially, high cognitive flexibility tend to benefit more from using AI, and high metacognition, meaning the spending more skilled or spending more time planning, monitoring, and adjusting, let's say, the work, the procedure of thinking, benefit more versus people who have low cognitive flexibility or low metacognition benefit either don't benefit or they actually can get lower performance when using AI. So again, for time's sake, I won't get into all the detail. If you are interested, I'd be happy to share what the sources are. So let's talk about the last aspect, which is the motivation, the risk, right? So what are the risks of using AI in terms of in creative work? So it is documented again as empirical evidence that the use of AI could hurt motivation. So, for example, in one study using ChatGPT, even though it enhanced creative writing's fluency, flexibility, it actually makes it less enjoyable. In another study, very specifically, they say that working with AI and then you switch to working without AI, that reduces intrinsic motivation. And for our audience, we all know that intrinsic motivation is one of the most important things, right? So for creative work. So if that's the case, that's a red flag. Um, Similarly, passive use of AI, like such as copying AI content, reduces the perceived meaningfulness of work, which is the motivation aspect. Again, this is empirical evidence, not just theoretical argument. There are some other aspects of AI risks, such as reducing diversity. So, for example, AI tend to ask questions that are less diverse than a human in strategic decision making. So, I won't get into all the detail, but AI tend to ask questions that are more for interpretation, while executives tend to ask questions that are more diverse, covering different aspects in strategic decisions. And the another study, which actually is well cited, saying that even though using AI could maybe enhance our individual creativity, the combined output of different people is actually less diverse. So in other words, if you have 10 people, all of them using AI by themselves, and you combine all those 10 people's writing, and they are not very diverse as otherwise. So in other words, it reduces the collective diversity of the content generated when you use AI versus not. All right, so the last risk I think I want to emphasize, which is not exactly for creativity per se. So a recent study, which hasn't been peer reviewed yet, however, is from some MIT researchers. They say that the computer programmers, when they use AI assistant to do coding, they dramatically reduce their collaboration with humans by nearly 80%. And even though this is not specific about creativity, one could still argue that the computer programmers, they are doing creative work when they write code. So if those coding people tend to skip human collaboration when they have AI, it is entirely foreseeable that the trend could be applicable to other creative domain, right? So in other words, using AI might reduce our intention to engage in interpersonal collaboration. And that obviously, as we know, is not particularly good for um, creative work. So in summary, let me just synthesize it a little bit. Okay, so it's busy on this slide, but essentially, when we think of creativity, we can use the Amabelis componential theory of creativity, where individual creativity has to have the component of creative process, domain knowledge, task motivation, and sometimes we can talk about social environment, right? And then now we add an additional component of AI. So essentially synthesizing what we have covered, the different aspects of the AI benefits and AI risks come down to these different aspects, right? So we know that AI may reduce our diversity in thinking. We know that AI is better able to benefit if we maintain our cognitive flexibility and metacognition. We know that AI might reduce our motivation, and we know that AI might reduce our intention to work with people. And in terms of human AI interaction, we have empirical studies showing that using AI in moderation actively create and think for ourselves first are beneficial, right? So that's kind of putting different pieces together into one picture. So this is obviously not a perfect model or even an academic paper. It's just something that I want to be able to put different pieces together into one slide. So that's is essentially a bit of summary of what it is. The other way is put it into a table, but this is pretty much the same thing. This is essentially the same thing, just putting in a table. And I think the principles are straightforward, uh, and many of them already are mentioned by earlier talks. I hope that this talk helps in connecting these principles with empirical evidence, not just anecdotal, and also help us think in a hopefully more comprehensive ways, meaning to benefit the most from AI. It's not one approach, it's not two tips. It is to think through this in a more um, comprehensive manner for us to benefit the most. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you. Um,
Kai, well done. Thank you very much. You're getting some digital rounds of applause. So we've got a little bit of time. The conference officially closes at 2:15. I want to give some of the wrap-up time to you to see if there are any comments or questions from the participants in this session relative to your presentation. So let's open it up to the floor. You can stop sharing, Kai, and that way we can see the full gallery view. There we go. So, Kai, we'll open it up to anyone who wants to flip on their microphone and jump in and there's different levels of expertise here. So it could be a question or it could be an observation or a comment or a further thought for all of us to ponder. So with that, I'm going to open it up to those of you who wish to jump in.
Okay, I can have a start.
Ben, yeah, please
So,
do.
so my question basically is, first of all, thank you very much for your fascinating talk. So what happens to human creativity when we have a generation of students, young adults, that over enthusiastically use AI for almost everything? So what's your take on that? And what should we do in the academic field in order to educate young people for a future that's completely different in terms of career perspectives and so forth?
Sven, I really wish you came forward with a really big question. I'm
yeah,
being
that's
sarcastic. That is the $60 million question. I'm curious to hear, Kai, your
right.
response to
Thank
that.
you. So I think the concern is kind of universal, right? So in other
Yeah.
words, every, let's say, university president or even just middle school, head, they're thinking about similar things. So I think in my so based on the empirical evidence, right, and based on the general, theories around creativity, I think a very key aspect of, let's say, creative thinking is the motivation aspect. And I think that part cannot be overestimated. I think that's the part where regardless of what AI, how good it is, right? At the end of the day, if we lose motivation, then nothing really matters, right? So, um, even if we have the best AI in the world, if we are not motivated to create, then what difference does it make that we have the best AI? So I think regardless of what the discipline we're teaching or the domain, creative domain we're talking about, I think protecting the human motivation, protecting the independent thinking is the very key piece of whatever the solution is going to be out there, right? So from the design of AI itself, how do we make design AI in the sense that it is still keeping human motivation, to how we interact with it, to how we, let's say, what kind of assignment we give students. I think it's extremely important to always keep that motivation aspect um, at the very center. And by the way, I actually put the motivation at the center of my little model, right? So, and that is actually, it could be my bias, but I just think that without the motivation, everything else just falls apart. And we are very excited about AI, and there's nothing wrong with it. Uh, at the same time, I think it's putting human motivation at the very center of what we do is going to be a key concern. There may be multiple ways to do it. Again, there's how do we design assignment? How do we design AI itself? How do we design the interaction? And so on and so forth. And I'm just hoping that in the next couple of years, there should be some sort of widely accepted practices.
Mhm.
Then I'll jump in as well and give my opinion. This is more anecdotal than it is. I appreciate Kai how you were using the empirical evidence. There's a distinction we make as we're teaching creative problem solving at Buffalo State, and that is doing and being. So we're teaching creative problem solving so that you can do it more effectively, more in line with an operation. But there's also the being side, and this harkens back to the presentation that Dr. Kaufman gave yesterday, and that is that when we engage in a creative act, Csikszentmihalyi's highest flow, right? There are benefits that we experience as humans that we don't get when we rely on AI, and that being able to exercise creativity as a being, that self-efficacy piece, Kai, that you're referring to in the empirical, relying on it as an operation can certainly, especially with divergent thinking, it can do it faster than we can. But that doesn't take away the benefits that we derive as human beings when we engage. It is the essence of being a human, is that when we engage in creative thinking, it fulfills us. It's satisfying.
Mhm.
I used to make up stories when I was putting my boys to bed and ask them, give me three random words, and I'd make up a story on the spot. Well, I can do that with ChatGPT before I go lay down with them. Here's three words, create a story. But that's not satisfying. I don't have that, fulfillment of my own imagination. So I think part of it too is emphasizing in the educational process the value of the being part of creativity. Also, in the prior section, Kai heard me share this true story. I was facilitating with Hector Ramos at a university. He did the session. I don't know if you were in that previous session, so
Yeah,
I
you may have
was, I
I
already
was
was.
heard
there.
this. And I talked about the hurricane
Yes.
that knocked out the power. If we were interacting with, AI, all the thinking would have stopped, but we were able to continue to work because we have our minds to generate and engage in creative thinking. So that's my response to build on Kai's uh, answer to your question. A profound question. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry
Thank you.
for that.
Thank you.
No, no. Thank you for the prompt. Other comments, questions, observations for Kai or for the good of the order?
Well, I'll take one on, and Thomas Vogel here at Emerson College in Boston. And first of all, congratulations again on organizing the conference, but also the talks, Kai. And I think it relates very much to Hector's presentation earlier. And as we're facing and more evidence, what you just pointed out, what do you think are the opportunities as well as the challenges of introducing creativity as a standalone topic to be taught at every university or possibly even in high school? And I'm going to connect that with Hector actually pointed out, I think he has a minor in creativity studies and the course that he described earlier in his session for freshmen. So I'm just wondering, you're experts, particularly also Dr. Puccio, who has done this work for a long time. Can we, or what does it take for us to kind of open the gate and build more capacity in this area? What do we need?
That's a great question. Again, like Sven's question, Thomas, that's a big question. And this is why we have this exchange. Kai, if it's okay with you, I'll jump
Sure.
in and ask you to add further commentary. Thomas, I've been thinking about this a lot. Last year I was on sabbatical. I was in London for 6 weeks. While I was there, I visited the City University of London. They have a Center for Creativity and Artificial Intelligence. And while I was there, I was delivering lectures. At the same time, I was working on this book, which I referenced in Hector's session. This is the Palgrave Handbook of Applied Creativity in Higher Education. I'm writing this book at the very same time I'm visiting a Center for Creativity and Artificial Intelligence. And I have to tell you, Thomas, I was wrestling with an existential question. And the existential question relates to the question that you raised. In an era of artificial intelligence, what's the role of creative education? Is it dead? And the answer that I walked away with was no, it's more important. And I think the reason why it's more important is what Kai referenced in terms of metacognition and understanding your own thinking and the creative process. Because by and large, we, and Hector made reference to this as well, we think about the content, not the process. And when you're interacting with AI or you're solving problems with others, if you cannot think at that executive level, your thinking is going to be highly inefficient. And in the keynote earlier today, one of the things that Dr. Yates said, as he worked with these other colleges and universities, many of the comments that were made by the students wasn't the value of interacting with the AI bot itself. It was learning a process through the guide that they had created that helped them to be more systematic as creative problem solvers. So, Thomas, I think it's even more important than ever to have standalone creativity courses. So, it's sort of like the analogy of if you watch an exercise video, are you becoming physically healthier? No. If you're watching ChatGPT solve a problem for you, are you becoming more creative? No. So how do we engage students in this? I do think it's becoming increasingly more important because poor thinking just happens faster with AI. We get to a bad conclusion more quickly than if we are interacting with and facilitating it ourselves. And at the City University, I was talking to a doctoral student who had done a research study on designers using AI to come up with new toy designs, and they compared those who were deliberately trained in applied creative problem solving methodologies versus those who were not. And subject matter experts identified the product concepts that were generated by those who were interacting with AI but had deliberate creativity training. Their outcomes were judged to be significantly more creative. So again, this is unpublished, but it reinforces what I believe, and I have to say, it was very much an existential question for me. Does it make sense? Or is it more efficient to turn this over to AI? And I've landed on no. And the World Economic Forum collaborates or corroborates this point of view. Their 2025 jobs report, looking forward, asking 1,000, surveying 1,000 employers, what are the most important skills between 2025 and 2030? Number one was AI and big data. Number five was creative thinking. So it's not less important. It's more important, I feel. So great question.
I second that. And if anyone is interested, I do have some empirical data that anyone might be interested in. If you are, I'll put it in the chat.
Please do. 100%. Absolutely. That's why this is called the Creativity Expert Exchange.
And it also confirms the work that you've been doing all the years at SUNY Buffalo. So but I'm with you. But I believe it takes many villages to do it on a large scale. So collaborating amongst each other might be the best way to accomplish that.
Absolutely, 100%. So thank you for that. Thanks for sharing. I'm just pasting it so it's not lost after I close this room. Thank you for sharing that resource, and thanks for a great question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Pucho, about that. So yes, I think there should be yeah, ideally there should be like a collective effort in pushing this, right? So by the way, the other thing I did not get time to put into the talk was that AI has a risk that is not obvious, where AI gives us a false confidence of things, right? So that may sound pretty maybe obvious once we mention it. However, in practice, right, it's hard. So when in the middle of working with AI, it's hard to remove that overconfidence, right? So, and then that, of course, that's relevant to metacognition in the sense not just that we need to have a process, but I think also the kind of thinking about thinking metacognition in the sense that we need to recognize that the overconfidence that AI gives us can be very strong and undetectable. So we don't know we are overconfident with AI help, but until something really goes very wrong.
Yeah, makes a great deal of sense. We're just up against our time. Thank you for joining the Creativity Expert Exchange. I'm going to put my email. I just put the Palgrave Handbook title into the chat box. I'm also going to put my email address. I'm going to ask you to make suggestions or recommendations for keynotes and topics in the future, please. Feel free to reach out to me. We have been running this Creativity Expert Exchange for 20-some years now, and I have to say, it takes a lot of sweat equity to put it on, but every time we do it, because of these conversations, I feel rewarded as a result of this kind of exchange. And so, Kai, I want to thank you for being a longtime contributor. Excellent presentation. It has helped me immensely, and the conversation here, as well as part of the exchange, I have found to be very stimulating. So thank you all. Thanks for joining us. Please look forward to Creativity Expert Exchange 2027. Hope we cross paths in the future. I will be closing the room. Enjoy the rest of your day and the weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.